So I do owe you guys a little bit of an apology here. In one of my previous videos regarding the August updates that can pretty much just be referred to as Title Update 2.5, seeing as it gave us a lot more content in the form of a whole new tier of difficulty for the monsters, those being the 9-star quests of course that allow us to farm the RNG charms, along with a whole list of buffs to I believe 11 out of the 14 weapons. It really was a huge patch. But along with that we also got a buff to a couple of skills, those being the Bubbly Dance Mizutsune set bonus, which I made a whole separate video about, and of course the Ebony Odogaron set bonus, Burst Boost, which I also made a video about. And that is where I had a couple of problems with a video that I made, and some of you guys pointed out some of the mistakes that I made, and I don't want to blow this out of proportion. I'm not saying that anyone was toxic to me, in fact everybody was pretty constructive in their criticism, nor did the video go viral by any means. It stayed within the average amount of views that I usually get on the channel for Monster Hunter Wilds videos, and the like to dislike ratio, despite being one of the lowest that I have had on the channel pretty much all year, is nothing too alarming really. So again, I don't want to come off as if the community is against me in any way, but there were certainly mistakes made in the video that I do want to point out, and things that I should have said to address some of the counterpoints that would later be used against the video. So let's take a step back and address the mistakes that I made, and after doing that I will be showing you some changes that I have made to the build that I do believe make it a lot better, a lot more comfortable and fun, and really just kind of fixes the issue that everyone had with the builds. So with that being said, hello everyone, my name is Dark Hero, and let's get started. So once again, the video in question was regarding the Burst Boost set bonus that was buffed in the August update. So prior to the August update, the skill Burst Boost and the 2-piece set bonus used to increase your attack while burst was active by 3 points, and with the 4-piece set bonus by 10 points. A fairly conservative number that really didn't warrant opting into this set bonus, especially when you had so many better alternatives for armor pieces. Well, now as of the August update, with the buff that we received, the 2-piece set bonus will now actually increase your attack while burst is active by 8 attack points, and with the 4-piece set bonus by a whopping 18 raw attack. That is a massive increase. We're talking about the 2-piece set bonus being almost 3 times as effective as it was in the past. So obviously something like that should not be overlooked. And when we take a look at the build that I made for the video is where we kind of see some issues with what I said. As I was talking about this build being pretty much something that you could use for just about any melee weapon, there were a couple of things that I should have taken more into account. So as you can see here in the video, we're using the 2-piece Guardian Ebony Odogaron along with 3 pieces from the Arc-Tempered monsters to get the Guts set bonus. Something that I'll show you in the build that I have made is still something that I use because you get a massive 5% attack increase by having Guts, and it just works quite well. However, the problem here is, on top of this not being all too well optimized, is that again, since I said it worked for all weapons, a lot of weapons are going to use stamina, and that leads us to Maximum Might. Maximum Might has been a staple since World introduced it, giving you a 30% affinity increase at level 3, provided that you are at full stamina, with some leeway in the activation time, allowing you to actually spend some stamina and still maintain it active. And naturally for weapons like the Insect Glaive or the Dual Blades, it's going to be much harder for you to maintain Maximum Might active, which I refrained from mentioning in the video, but that was actually because I did make a couple of videos in the past where I did use builds for the Dual Blades and the Insect Glaive both, where you would use Maximum Might for those weapons. The problem however is that you would be taking advantage of the Guardian Engineath set bonus, that in case you aren't aware, basically gives you a second stamina bar on top of the one you already have, and you can consume that stamina and it's not going to count towards losing Maximum Might. You will still have it active despite be actively spending stamina by being in demon mode with the Dual Blades, for example. This was in fact for a pretty long time the way a lot of Dual Blade speedrunners played. I believe there were also plenty of Hammer and Insect Glaive speedrunners that have been using Maximum Might on their builds, because again it's a massive 30% affinity increase for only 3 level 2 decorations. But obviously when you take a look at the build that I made for the video, I'm not using the Guardian Engineath set bonus, so I don't expect you to be able to maintain that stamina for Maximum Might active very easily. And even though some of the best Dual Blades combos rely on you getting in and out of demon mode to the point where you're able to regenerate enough stamina so that Maximum Might never runs out, without having the Guardian Engineath set bonus, it's going to be very hard to do that. And I didn't even explain those combos in the videos like I did in previous videos of mine, so there was a lack of communication and instruction on my part, combined with me also not taking into account that these kinds of combos and playstyles that rely on you being very conservative and careful about your stamina are honestly pretty boring in one note and only really work properly in speedruns because a lot of players script their speedruns. And when I say script, I don't mean that they have an actual script running on in the background of the game that changes the pattern behavior of the monster. No, I mean that players will essentially create a route for what they are going to do and what the monster is going to do in response, and a lot of times they'll be able to script out basically the first 2 minutes of a speedrun by themselves, as they'll be able to do enough damage to trip the monster, KO it, cut off its tail, break the wounds, whatever it is. It's a huge component of speedrunning, and I do want to make it clear, nobody should be alarmed at this, it's a very normal thing. But all of that to say that it was really stupid of me to include the maximum might portion here of the build without giving an alternative for the dual blades, the hammer, the insect glaive, and other weapons that often spend stamina, and simply giving a blanket statement that this is going to work with just about any weapon whilst heavily limiting the playstyle and weapon choice with the build really isn't a good way to make a video. So again, I do want to apologize and say my bad. I do want to own up to it, and so I hope to rectify it with this build and the updated build that I'm about to show you. Now I do also want to address another criticism. A lot of people were saying that the dual blades don't want to go for this kind of build because they are a lot better with affinity. Truth be told, it kind of depends on the matchup, and raw damage is going to work very well against most of the matchups in Monster Hunter Wilds, even for the dual blades. So much so that when Monster Hunter Wilds initially released, a lot of these speedrun builds were focusing on having as much raw attack as possible and having affinity and elemental values as more of a secondary objective to focus on when making your sets. And that's kind of the thing that is going on here with Wilds. I feel like from the calculations that I have made, it looks like simply going for the raw damage output is going to turn out better in the long run, especially if you're able to maintain enough uptime on all of these raw attack damage increasing skills. So with that said, let's move on to the build, as I do have a lot to address there as well. So I am actually going to be showing you 3 different builds, though they do all share the same exoskeleton, so there are only going to be some slight variations to this build, catering to a couple of different playstyles so that you are more comfortable with it, and a final alternative where I go over the RNG charms and how they can change the build to potentially make it even better. So the armor pieces that we're going to be using are going to be the Guardian Ebony Helmet Beta, along with the Waist, which both give us burst and allow us to get the Ebony Auto Garon set bonus burst boost. We then have the Radau Gamma chest piece and the Vambraces, along with the Uthduna Gamma Greaves, which are all incredibly efficient pieces and will also give us Guts. The Guts set bonus that you can obtain by having any 3 Gamma armor pieces from Arc Tempered monsters will give you a 5% raw attack increase at the cost of lowering your defense, but also gives you the bonus that you can survive a lethal hit, and once you do, you lose the attack bonus, but you also lose the debuff to your defense, and you still get another benefit because now your defense and your elemental resistances are going to be buffed. And that 5% raw attack is a fantastic multiplier, especially given that burst and burst boost are going to give us so much attack that it just combines really well with the build we're making. Now for this first build, I'm going to focus on a bit more of a traditional build where you go for a little bit more affinity to land critical hits and deal more damage, but also to increase our raw damage. So as you can see, I went for the Challenger Charm, added 2 Throttle Jewels, 2 Counter Jewels, 1 Counter Attack Jewel, 3 Protection Jewels, and finally 1 Enduring Jewel. And we end up with Latent Power 5, Agitator 3, Burst 3, Divine Blessing 3, Quick Sheath 3, Counter Strike 2, Evade Extender 2, Adrenaline Rush 1, and Item Prolonger 1. Latent Power 5 is going to give you a massive 50% affinity increase along with a 50% stamina depletion rate reduction, though to activate Latent Power you need to either take damage or a certain time has to be passed on the hunt for it to activate. In order to be as effective as possible with Latent Power, you should always bring Corrupted Mental with you, as the damage that you take by having Corrupted Mental equipped will actually allow you to trigger Latent Power a little bit quicker into the hunt. I did some testing and I think it led up to me activating Latent Power 60 to 90 seconds earlier than before, so it really is a key component of this build. Additionally, because we have 2 Radau pieces, we're going to be getting the set bonus Thunderous Roar 1, which will extend the duration of Latent Power, allowing us to maintain that massive 50% affinity for a longer duration of the hunt. Agitator 3 is just just there for us to get even more attack and affinity. We already had Agitator 1 from the Uthduna Greaves, so it just makes sense to put a couple more points into it to get even more attack and also get 7% affinity. Burst level 3 is going to provide us with a massive damage bonus that of course is going to stack together with the Ebony Odogaron's burst boost, which will extend the duration of burst and also give us an additional 8 attack while it is active. So if you're using a fast weapon like again the dual blades, you'll be able to pretty much have a permanent uptime on the skill. Divine Blessing 3 is just there because it is, in my opinion, the best defensive skill in the entire game, allowing you to reduce any damage that you take by 50%, provided that you are lucky and it triggers, though alternatively you can go for any other level 1 skill that you prefer like Recovery Speed, Constitution, Marathon Runner, etc, etc. Quick Sheath level 3 is just there because it comes by default from the Uthduna Greaves. I personally don't find this skill to be all that powerful on any weapon besides the longsword that makes good use of it, so think of it as just a small bonus. Counter-Strike 2, as I always mention in my build videos, one of the best offensive skills in the entire game, giving you a high raw attack damage buff whenever you get hit by an attack that would knock you back, which is going to be most of them if you're fighting the endgame monsters, and if you time your focus strikes right, you're able to use them when you are about to be hit by a monster and still get the benefit out of Counter-Strike without actually getting hit, therefore getting a massive attack boost without having any downtime. Ideally you would go for level 3, which would extend the duration to 45 seconds and give you a 25 raw attack increase, and you could do that if you were to remove counter attack, which is what gives you Adrenaline Rush, which whenever you perfectly dodge an attack is going to give you an additional 10 raw attack for 30 seconds, so it kind of depends on how good you are at getting these perfect dodges, though me personally I would get rid of counter attack, aka Adrenaline Rush, and I would swap it for Counter Strike. We do have a Vid Extender level 2 to make these dodges a little bit easier to trigger, though keep in mind the Vid Extender does not give you any iframes, it just allows your dodge to cover a bigger distance, so again it goes back to whether or not you are good at consistently dodging attacks and making good use of Adrenaline Rush. Lastly, Item Prolonger is also a level 1 decoration that I've been using a lot ever since the Zoshia armor was added to the game. It is my go-to option after I get Divine Blessing 3, as extending the duration of any consumable item you use like Demon Drugs, Might Seed, Dash Juice, etc. is effectively going to allow you to deal more damage or have more stamina to dodge incoming attacks, whatever it may be, though again you can replace it with any level 1 decoration you want. Now lastly, for the weapon, ideally you are going to be going for the Artian weapons, and the key thing for this build is to try to get as much raw attack as you possibly can. As you can see, I have 3 attack infusions and then 2 attack boosts for the reinforcement bonus. If it were up to me, it would be 5 attack boosts for the reinforcement bonus, but you need to be really lucky to get that, but that is how I would go about it. Then for the decorations, I slot in an Expert 3 and a Critical 3 to get 12% additional affinity from Critical Eye and raise the damage of my critical hits from 25% to 34%, since again we are focusing a bit more on affinity. Having crit boost is going to be essential to make good use out of that affinity. Lastly, I have Razor Sharp Handicraft to help maintain the sharpness of the weapon, though if you do find it that you are never running out of sharpness, then in that case you can go for Crit Boost level 2 to raise the damage of your crits up to 40%, or alternatively go for Attack Boost 3 to get 7 raw attack. Now the second version of this build is going to focus even more so on raw damage. We're foregoing a little bit of extra affinity, but we make up for it with a ludicrous amount of attack, and this build is going to be reminiscent of the speedrun builds that we saw when Wilds initially released, where a lot of dual blade speedrunners were not focusing on elemental damage, were not focusing on affinity, they were simply going all out for raw attack. The armor pieces are going to be exactly the same, though this time around we're using the counter attack charm 3 to get Adrenaline Rush 3. And then for the talismans, it's really pretty much the same thing as before, though this time around, instead of having an Adrenaline Rush decoration, I have a Counter Strike decoration. That way I can get Adrenaline Rush level 3 and Counter Strike level 3. As I said before, getting Counter Strike level 3 is a massive damage bonus, and combining that with the additional 20 raw attack from Adrenaline Rush 3 really is going to be massive. Downside of course is that we have less affinity. We only have Agitator level 1, so truth be told, the only affinity we get is the 12% from Critical Eye, the 3% from Agitator, and the 50% from Latent Power, meaning that not counting for the 10% affinity on these dual blades, you're going to have 65% affinity, so 75% in total. Again, the amount of affinity is not ideal, but this build is really going to excel at you dealing massive amounts of damage with raw attack, and the best thing about it is that you can take it with any kind of dual blade. You don't really need to worry about the elemental matchups, and honestly that is kind of nice given that a lot of these elemental matchups in wilds really aren't elemental favored. So if you're the kind of guy that likes to just have one build for pretty much every monster you hunt in the game, then you can go with this and you're going to find success. Final note about this version of the build is that once again you can replace the expert jewel with an attack boost if you don't mind losing 12% affinity for even more raw attack, or replace the razor sharp handicraft with attack boost if you don't find yourself running out of sharpness. And lastly, the final version of this build is going to be revolving around the new RNG talismans. And truth be told, there's really a lot of options that you can go for here. You can go for example for this one right here that I have with attack boost 3 and burst level 1. That's going to be very powerful, but when push comes to shove, it's going to just basically be a little bit better than the previous raw build. As you can see, I also went for an attack boost on my decoration to get attack boost level 5, which is going to give me some additional raw attack and a 4% raw attack increase with crit boost and razor sharp handicraft. And then I have critical boost 4 because I'm able to slot in one critical boost into the RNG charm, so I end up with latent power 5, burst 4, which is going to give you a massive damage bonus, and counter strike 3, though the problem here is that I am foregoing adrenaline rush. So this build is going to work a little bit worse than the previous build if you maintain the adrenaline rush buff active, but if you are someone that isn't consistent about getting that adrenaline rush active every 30 seconds to give it a good uptime, then this build is going to be a better alternative, as you simply get more raw attack consistently without any conditions, or at least with less conditions. Again, counter strike lasts for 45 seconds and latent power is going to have a very high duration because of the radar voltage set bonus. Ultimately, these RNG charms just kind of help you finalize the builds. They're not build defining by themselves, which I think is a good thing. So if you don't have the perfect ones, you can always go for the charms that you have already crafted and they are going to work quite well for you, and in a lot of cases they're even going to be better. So do not fret if you don't have any of these RNG charms, you are more than well enough without them. With that being said, let me know how you guys feel about this burst boost dual blades build. Again, I do apologize for that one video. I do have to take accountability and you guys were right in pointing that out, so hopefully I was able to rectify my mistake with this video and give you a better updated build for the dual blades that take advantage of burst boost and is actually very fun and satisfying. With that said, my name is Dark Hero, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, happy hunting!